Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. Marcus had always believed that love was supposed to be simple. Two people meet, they fall in love, they build a life together. But as he stood in his kitchen, holding a crumpled piece of paper that would change everything, he realized that love was anything but simple. The DNA test results trembled in his hands, and with them, 3 years of his life seemed to crumble like autumn leaves. The morning had started like any other. Emma was upstairs getting ready for work, and 2-year-old Sophie was playing with her blocks in the living room, her soft giggles filling the house with warmth. Marcus had been making coffee when the mail arrived, and among the usual bills and advertisements was an envelope that made his blood run cold. He hadn't ordered any DNA test, but there it was, addressed to him, with results that would shatter his world. "Daddy, look." Sophie had called from the living room, her voice bright with innocence. She was holding up a tower of colorful blocks, proud of her creation. Marcus had walked over to her, his heart heavy with a love so profound it physically hurt. Her dark curls bounced as she moved, and her eyes, those beautiful brown eyes that he had always assumed came from Emma's side of the family, sparkled with joy. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he had whispered, kneeling down to her level. As he hugged her small body against his chest, breathing in her familiar scent of baby shampoo and innocence, he wondered how he was going to survive what was coming. Next, the sound of Emma's heels clicking down the stairs had made him stand up quickly, folding the paper and shoving it into his pocket. She appeared in the doorway, stunning as always in her navy blue dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled. For a moment, looking at her, Marcus almost convinced himself that there had been some mistake. This was Emma, his Emma, the woman who had stood by his side through everything. The woman who had given him the most precious gift in the world. "Sophie, you look lost in thought," Emma had said, walking over to kiss his cheek. Her perfume, the same one she had worn since they first met, enveloped him like a bittersweet memory. "Everything okay?" Marcus had nodded, not trusting his voice. How could he tell her that he knew? How could he explain that someone had anonymously sent him a DNA test, claiming that Sophie might not be his daughter? How could he admit that, despite his better judgment, he had secretly taken the test, using a strand of Sophie's hair, because the doubt had been eating him alive? The past few months had been filled with whispered conversations that stopped when he entered a room, phone calls that Emma took in private, and a distance between them that felt like an ocean. He had tried to ignore the signs, tried to believe that his imagination was running wild, that the evidence had been mounting like storm clouds on the horizon. Emma had left for work with a kiss and a smile, promising to pick up groceries on her way home. Sophie had waved goodbye from the window, her small hand pressed against the glass, and Marcus had felt his heart break a little more. After Emma's car disappeared down the street, he had finally allowed himself to really read the results. Words were clinical, cold, final. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. The probability of paternity is 0%. Marcus had sunk into his armchair, the paper falling from his numb fingers. Sophie had climbed onto his lap, concern creasing her tiny features. "Daddy sad?" she had asked, her small hand patting his cheek. The gesture was so innocent, so full of love that Marcus had to bite back tears. "No, baby girl," he had whispered, holding her close. "Daddy's just tired." But Marcus wasn't tired. He was devastated. For 2 years, he had been Sophie's father in every way that mattered. He had walked the floors with her when she was colicky, had taught her to say "Mama" and "Dada," had kissed her scraped knees and read her bedtime stories. He had planned for her future, had opened a college fund, had dreamed of walking her down the aisle someday. And now a piece of paper was telling him that none of it was real. The day passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Marcus went through the motions of being a father and a husband. But inside, he was falling apart. He made Sophie lunch, played with her toys, put her down for her nap, all while his mind raced with questions. Who was Sophie's real father? How long had Emma been lying to him? Had she ever loved him at all? Or had he just been a convenient cover for her mistake? When Emma came home that evening, her arms full of grocery bags, Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table, the DNA results spread out in front of him. She stopped in the doorway, her face draining of color as she saw the papers. "Marcus," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can explain. Can you?" Marcus asked, his voice surprisingly steady. "Can you explain how the daughter I've loved for 2 years isn't mine? Can you explain why you've been lying to me for 3 years?" Emma set down the groceries with shaking hands and walked slowly to the table. She looked older suddenly, the weight of her secrets aging her before his eyes. "How did you get these?" "Someone sent them to me," Marcus said. "Someone who knew the truth. Someone who thought I deserved to know." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but Marcus felt no sympathy. He had cried all his tears earlier, holding Sophie in his arms, wondering if he would lose the right to call himself her father. "It was before we got married," Emma said finally, her voice breaking. "I had a conference in Chicago, and I met someone. It was just one night, Marcus. One stupid, meaningless night." "Meaningless?" Marcus stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Our daughter was conceived on that meaningless night, Emma. How is that meaningless?" "Because I love you," Emma cried, reaching for him. "I've always loved you. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. I had already accepted your proposal. We were planning our wedding, and I was so happy. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. So you lied instead. I convinced myself that the baby was yours. The timing was close enough, and I wanted it to be true so badly that I believed it. But as Sophie grew up, as she started looking more and more like..." Emma's voice trailed off. "Like who, Emma? Like her real father?" Emma's sobs filled the kitchen, but Marcus felt hollow inside. He thought of all the times people had commented on how Sophie didn't look like him, how he had laughed it off, saying she was all Emma. He thought of Emma's strange behavior lately, her secretive phone calls, her distracted demeanor. He contacted you, didn't he? Marcus said, the pieces falling into place. Sophie's biological father. He found out about her somehow. Emma nodded miserably. He saw a photo of Sophie on my Facebook page. He said she looked exactly like his sister did at that age. He started asking questions, and I couldn't deny it anymore. "So you've been in contact with him? He wants to meet her, Marcus. He wants to be part of her life." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Not only was he not Sophie's father, but now he had to compete with a man who had a biological claim to the child he had raised as his own. "Where does that leave me?" Marcus asked quietly. "You're her father," Emma said desperately. "You're the one who's been there for her since birth. You're the one she calls Daddy. Biology doesn't change that." But Marcus knew it did change things. It changed everything. Sophie would grow up knowing that the man she called Daddy wasn't really her father. She would have questions, and eventually, she would have to choose between the father who raised her and the father who gave her life. That night, after putting Sophie to bed, Marcus sat in his study, staring at photos of his daughter. In every picture, she was smiling, happy, secure in the love of her parents. How could he tell her that everything she believed about her family was a lie? How could he explain that Mommy had made a mistake that would change all of their lives forever? Emma knocked on the door, but Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't look at her right now without seeing the lie that had been living between them for 3 years. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with his heart, had built their entire relationship on a foundation of deception. The next morning, Marcus made a decision. He packed a bag and kissed Sophie goodbye, telling her he had to go on a work trip. The little girl clung to him, sensing something was wrong, and Marcus had to force himself to leave before he broke down completely. He drove to his brother's house, needing space to think, to process what his life had become. David took one look at his face and knew something was seriously wrong. She cheated, Marcus said simply, sitting heavily on David's couch. And Sophie isn't mine. David was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. Are you sure? Marcus pulled out the DNA results, his hands shaking slightly. As sure as science can make me. God, Marcus, I'm so sorry. The worst part is, I still love her, Marcus admitted. I still love Sophie. I don't know how to stop being her father just because some test says I'm not. You don't have to stop, David said firmly. You raised her. You're her father in every way that matters. But what happens when she's older? What happens when she wants to know her real father? What happens when I have to explain that her whole life has been built on a lie? David didn't have answers, and Marcus didn't expect him to. Some problems were too big for simple solutions. For 3 days, Marcus stayed away from home, ignoring Emma's calls and text messages. He needed time to think, to figure out what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. On the 4th day, Emma showed up at David's door. Please, she begged when David answered. I need to talk to him. Sophie keeps asking for her daddy, and I don't know what to tell her. Marcus came to the door, his heart breaking at the sight of Emma's tear-stained face. Despite everything, he still loved her. Despite the lies and the betrayal, she was still the woman he had planned to grow old with. I'll give you two some privacy, David said, disappearing into the house. Marcus stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Emma looked exhausted, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and worn. Sophie misses you, she said quietly. She doesn't understand why Daddy went away. I needed time to think. And what have you decided? Marcus looked at the woman he had married, the woman who had given him the greatest joy of his life, even if that joy was built on a lie. I've decided that I love Sophie too much to let her grow up thinking her father abandoned her because of something she had no control over. Emma's face crumpled with relief. Does that mean you'll come home? I'll come home for Sophie, Marcus said carefully. But things between us. I don't know if I can forgive this, Emma. I don't know if I can trust you again. I'll do anything, Emma said desperately. I'll go to counseling. I'll cut off all contact with him. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. It's not that simple, Marcus said sadly. You can't just make this disappear. Sophie has a biological father who wants to meet her. That's not going to go away. We don't have to tell her, Emma said quickly. We can just continue as we are. She never has to know. Marcus shook his head. She deserves to know the truth. Maybe not now, but someday. And when that day comes, I want her to know that I chose to be her father, even when I found out she wasn't biologically mine. The drive home was silent, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they pulled into the driveway, Marcus could see Sophie's face pressed against the living room window, her eyes bright with excitement at seeing his car. She ran to the door. As soon as they entered, throwing herself into Marcus's arms with the complete trust that only a child could give. Daddy, she cried, her small arms wrapping around his neck. I missed you. I missed you too, sweetheart, Marcus whispered, holding her close. In that moment, he didn't care about DNA tests or biological fathers. This was his daughter, the child he had loved from the moment he first held her. Nothing would ever change. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Emma began the difficult process of rebuilding their relationship. They started counseling, slowly working through the layers of hurt and betrayal. Emma cut off all contact with Sophie's biological father, promising to wait until Sophie was older before addressing that relationship. It wasn't easy. Some days, Marcus woke up angry, feeling the weight of the deception like a stone in his chest. Other days, he looked at his family and felt hopeful that they could work through this together. Love, he was learning, wasn't just about the easy times. It was about choosing to fight for something worth saving, even when everything seemed impossible. Sophie remained blissfully unaware of the adult drama surrounding her. She continued to call Marcus Daddy, to climb into his lap for bedtime stories, to ask for his help with her toys. Her innocent love became Marcus's anchor, reminding him why he was fighting so hard to keep their family together. One evening, as Marcus was giving Sophie her bath, she looked up at him with her serious brown eyes and said, "Daddy, do you love Emmy?" The question caught him off guard. "Of course I do, sweetheart. Why would you ask that?" "Because you were sad. And then you went away. And I thought maybe you didn't love me anymore." Marcus felt his heart break and heal at the same time. He lifted Sophie out of the bath, wrapping her in a fluffy towel, and sat down on the bathroom floor with her in his lap. "Sophie, I want you to listen to me very carefully," he said, looking into her eyes. "I love you more than anything in this whole world. I will always love you, no matter what happens. Do you understand?" Sophie nodded solemnly, her small hand patting his cheek. "I love you too, Daddy." That night, after Sophie was asleep, Marcus and Emma sat together on their bed, talking about the future. They had a long way to go, but for the first time since the DNA results had arrived, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Emma said softly, "but I want you to know that I've never regretted marrying you. Even if Sophie had been yours biologically, I would have chosen you. I would have chosen this life with you." Marcus took her hand, studying the wedding ring that had meant so much to him. "I need time," he said honestly. "I need to learn how to trust you again. But I want to try. For Sophie, and for us. I'll wait," Emma promised. "However long it takes." As they lay in the darkness, Marcus thought about the journey ahead of them. They would have to tell Sophie the truth someday. And that conversation would be one of the hardest things they would ever have to do. They would have to navigate the complex emotions of 3 adults who all had claims on one little girl's heart. They would have to rebuild a marriage that had been shattered by secrets and lies. But for now, they had tonight. They had a sleeping child down the hall who called him Daddy, and meant it with her whole heart. They had a love that was bruised, but not broken, a family that was complicated but worth fighting for. Marcus closed his eyes and made a silent promise to the universe, to Sophie and to himself. He would be the father she deserved, the man she could count on, the steady presence in her life no matter what storms came their way. Biology might not have made him her father, but love would keep him in that role forever. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges they couldn't even imagine yet. But as Marcus drifted off to sleep, listening to the quiet sounds of his family's breathing, he knew they would face those challenges together. Love, he had learned, wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to stay, choosing to forgive, choosing to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before. And in the morning, when Sophie woke up calling for her daddy, Marcus would be there, ready to love her with all the fierce devotion of a father's heart, regardless of what any test might say. Because some bonds are stronger than biology, and some love is deeper than blood. The love between a father and child is one of those sacred connections that transcends everything else. In the end, that was what mattered most.